for you and for me. You just wait.
Okay, let me just try this once again and just do it with feeling. Maybe I should be doing some things with feeling. I don't know. So, so yeah, that was my problem. I wasn't doing things with feeling. So we are hearing Dr. André Delang in the background. I'm going to continue to let that music play. We've now got the sound sorted out. Owen, I'm not so sure if you can hear it. Okay. We're getting Owen in there.
I can hear you now.
Okay. So if you want to go back out and then, because I think you're using your phone right now. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
My mobile.
So if you wanted to get back out and then come back in on your desktop, you're more than welcome to do that.
All right. Okay.
Thank you, Saya. So yeah, so that was the problem. It looks like I have to be live at all times, I suppose. So that's crazy. So anyway, we are live, and so that's very useful. Thank you for those of you who patiently sort of slogged it out here, waiting for us to get this show on the road. Anyway, that music that you hear in the background is music under the lung. If you're tuned in, you are in at Learning Academy Worldwide's broadcast live from Stockholm in Sweden. It's a very special broadcast because it's concerned with popularizing, promoting, and raising awareness for what we do in South Africa in terms of our work within vocational training in agriculture. So I'm giving this a second shot. We had a little bit of a hiccup earlier. But we've got through the technical difficulties. We've got it sorted out. I was saying to some students today, having a problem is not the problem. Being unable to solve the problem, that's the problem. And in the workplace, once you finish with your basic education, that's normally the space where you will be expected to shine. Not so much what you know, although knowledge is important. What is crucial is your ability to solve problems. I am waiting for Terry Martin, who I see is joining right now. I'll get him in there. Terry, you can hear me. I can hear you.
Okay, I've just started.
Yeah, I can see you. I'm sure yours. Can you hear me still, Terry?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now, and I think I understand what's the challenge here, and I'm not so sure why. I still haven't figured out. At least we can talk to each other, and let me see here. If we are thinking through this second chapter, Owen is going to join us very shortly. But Terry, maybe we can start fleshing this out. So last time we did, you can hear me okay, right?
I can hear you. Yep.
Good. Fantastic. Last time we were working through the question as to how we de-risk the future. How do we de-risk the future if our focus is strengthening human capacity or human capital, as we refer to it? I have on at the moment what I wanted to share last week is that we, in actual fact, have a space where we, in just a couple of weeks, Learning Academy Worldwide would be promoting its vocational training in agriculture at the Green Tech Expo. This is happening in Amsterdam from the 9th of June through to the 13th of June. We were there last year and were very, very encouraged by the interest. As you can see on this picture here, folks that came to our booth and interacted with delegates there from South Africa that joined me um, during this particular time. Last time when we were together, Terry, we also spoke a little bit about what we termed wisdom critical assets. We didn't speak such a lot about it, but I'm just wondering, do you want to just help clarify if you and I speak about wisdom critical assets? What do we mean?
Wisdom is something which is pan-national. In other words, it crosses cultures. It has been in every ancient culture as part and parcel of that culture's memory. And when we particularly think about the ancient Near East, we think of the Fertile Crescent, you think of Arcadia, Sumeria, Mesopotamia, that region. You think of the Assyrians, the Babylonians, and as it comes down, you see there's a huge wisdom tradition that comes out of that part of the world. So wisdom is a very ancient concept.
Mm.
And wisdom has to do with skill. It's a very hard thing to define in 5 words, in 10 words. It's very hard to define in a propositional statement. And there's a reason for that.
Mm.
And I guess the reason has to do with the fact that we normally think that if we can define something, we've got a grip of it.
Mm.
As if wisdom is something that you can tame and put in a box and walk around with it. you know, it has to do with skill and skillful living, being able to navigate life and living. That takes great skill. And so the word is used in a variety of ways. There are at least 11 synonyms, for example, in the wisdom literature that fall within the same semantic field
Mm.
as this word does. I'm talking about the Hebrew literature now, the word chokhmah. 11 different words that become correlatives, right? Or as we would say, correlatives to this concept.
Yes.
And it has to do with mobile skill. In other words, being able to do things with your hands. It has to do with managerial skill, being able to manage people who in turn execute tasks.
Was agricultural skill in that old ancient
Oh,
Hebrew
it
wisdom?
was right in there,
Mm.
because somebody who had that kind of wisdom skill knew how to read. They
Yeah.
could sight read climate. They could sight read
Mm.
weather.
Mm.
They could sight read conditions, and they knew what was coming. And so to plow a field, right, has to do with a very seasonal conception of how the world works.
Yes.
And so there's a whole range and shades of meaning to this word, but it's one of those very difficult words to define. I think the best way to do it is to say that there's a philosophical meaning to wisdom, right? And there is a practical meaning or practical side to wisdom. And we normally talk about that in this Greek word, which is the word phronesis, right? Phronesis has to do with the practical working out of wisdom's thinking, for example.
Mm.
We talk about practical wisdom skills, thinking. But all of that is a way of saying that what I know to be true as it functions in reality fleshes itself on the ground, fleshes itself out in a real tangible kind of way.
Right.
So it's a huge subject.
Yeah, and I'm thanks for that exposition. I yeah, I think it's important to think rightly and correctly through this in order to see the connection to the ground, as you say, as you put it. So thanks for that. And so when you and I structured this model for vocational training in agriculture, we put it at the center, the almost like pursuit for those assets or that skill. Now, I know that if we talk about, for instance, there's what we have, those elements around, especially not so much transportation there, but that because that had more to do with a reality on the ground. But those other elements in this graphic here talks about this is technology within agriculture, processing and extraction labs, the formal training, and then mechanization. One could put transportation in there that could probably cover the issue of logistics, right? Getting goods from one point to the other, in this value chain. But in all those activities, the intention, of course, is to be productive and profitable. And I'm using these two words quite deliberately, relating to a question that's further down on in this discussion. But so, when we were plotting this, Terry, in 2019, did, why did we put that wisdom pursuit right at the core of a vocational training in agriculture initiative?
Well, I think the genius of putting it there, Theo, to put it mildly. Now, that's not putting it mildly. That's putting it very in a very pronounced way. The genius of putting it there is wisdom is something you reach for. That's the best way I can explain it.
Mm.
Wisdom is not something you learn from a book in the benches. Wisdom is something that dawns on you as you engage the real world and engage it with all the faculties you have: your mental, your moral, your physical, your emotional, your spiritual faculties. And wisdom is something that is embodied. I wish I could talk into the whole area of cognition here, because it is so important. You read for knowledge, right? You read reality because you need to gain knowledge. You read a book because you want to gain a knowledge set. You reason for understanding. That's why you need to be dialoguing within the context of community. And here we're thinking agricultural community. We think a community where there's life, where living needs to be sustained. And it's out of that reading for knowledge and reasoning for understanding that you reach for wisdom. It's not something that is automatic. It's something that comes, can I almost say, after making up an aggressive pursuit of how knowledge works itself out in the real world in terms of solutions and in terms of valid and life-sustaining outcomes. If we think of sustainability as long-term health, then you bet wisdom needs to be at the heart of it. It's not just a matter of applying a proposition that I learned in a school or in a book, because life is a lot more dynamic than just a propositional statement. That statement points to something that is real, right? Something that's alive. If I tell you, Theo, if I point to the sun and I say, Theo, where's the sun? You're not going to look at the tip of my finger. You're going to look at where my finger's pointing, because my finger is a signifier of something significant. It's pointing to something significant. And so book knowledge cannot be an end in itself. It has to challenge people's thinking on the ground to reach for this aspect called wisdom, skill, to navigate agriculture, the agricultural space. Because if we need to understand what shall we then eat? And boy, we need a couple of skills under our belt, because we need to figure that one out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? What I put into my mouth is going to become part of me very soon. Yep.
And I think that it does answer the question here about why we put it at the core. And you're absolutely right. And you reminded me of a list that Mortimer Jerome Adler used to throw at his students and those around him. And he would ask you to order what he called the goods of the mind. It talked about knowledge, information, understanding, and wisdom.
Yep.
And just the question pushed the community of thinkers to value the pursuit of wisdom as the trophy, so to speak. And so, yeah, I appreciate those comments. For those of you, if you've just joined us, you are in good company. It's not myself so much, but where Terence and myself are talking through a few slides here related to our vocational training in agriculture program project in South Africa for young people, focused mainly on what we described as high stakes community. We try to avoid this connotation of what is described as we talk about low income communities, and we talk about a very derogatory ascriber under-resourced communities, and we think walking away from that connotation is useful. Now, we've just talked a little bit, especially for those of you who are listening in on the radio, we've talked a little bit about why is the pursuit of wisdom at the core of vocational training in agriculture. For us, at least, it is. And so maybe if you are interested to know a little bit more and want to understand why it should be part of your model, if you're working in education, you're more than welcome to reach out to us. I'm just moving on the slide presentation. Terry, last week we talked about how sure are you that the people that you work with, that they have the ability to pull it off. We're not going to go back to that. There is an episode of that. Do they have what it takes? In that whole discussion, we talked about this whole emphasis from people on and maybe too much of an emphasis on what is wrong in the community. And we talk about violence and unemployment. These are real dilemmas, unmistakably. But it is sometimes clouding our thinking or our vision or our hope on uh, focusing on what is strong. Subsequently, we are left a little bit paralyzed to actually do something meaningful, number one, because we feel that other people need to come and solve our problems. We don't have what it takes. We are not strong. When we looked at that, we had a tangible illustration. We talked about the life story, at least what we've learned from her. Our first graduation speaker was none other than Lorraine Iso from this community. When students graduated in 2023, it was Lorraine Iso, a small scale farmer in Harlem, who was the graduation keynote speaker. We didn't need to bring someone in from the outside. She understands the community, she understands the soil, she understands the young people, she understands the culture, and she was best capable and most able to address the issue of challenging young people to continue. Terry, that was, I think, where we stopped, and we mentioned that this particular work, I'm not so sure if I brought this up, but Cormac Russell and John McKnight, I'm not so sure, Terry, if you're familiar with this work, the connected community.
No, it doesn't sound familiar. No.
Mm, I've had a good number of conversations with Cormac, in fact. And it is very clear that there's the case they make for what he calls the ABCs of upliftment. That case is very valid, because it suggests that we should start looking at communities for, amongst other things, what they are, what is strong, not what is wrong. Um, and ABCD, they described it as asset based community development. When you hear that, Terry, um, what do you think is the aim or the pursuit in describing upliftment initiatives in that way, asset based community development?
Well, I think it's a wonderful way of thinking through upliftment.
Mm.
It's not just a topic, it is something very real. What is? What exists? Right?
Mm,
What, and that's why I think what assets exist inside of that community as deprived as what it presents itself or
mm,
how it presents itself to the one on the outside, maybe as depraved as well. But we need to take a posture of, as we said last week, we are co-investors. They are investing something without necessarily being cognizant of it.
mm,
They're investing themselves. For some of them, it's life and death. It's survival
mm,
or succumbing to obliteration, right? For many of us, it's not that. For many of us, it's just a matter of, you know, do we drop this and take the next rung up for the next rung up for the next rung on the ladder up?
mm,
But for those in those damaged and hurt communities, they bring something to the table. And I think this is a very fair way of going at it. And the reason I say that is when you understand something of cognitive science, right, you understand how the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere function together. As McGilchrist says, right hemisphere is the master, the
mm,
left hemisphere is the emissary.
mm,
And the left brain is not half as good and smart as the right brain is, but neither of the two can do without each other.
mm,
As long as the left brain doesn't kick away its dependence on the right brain,
mm,
right? And so the right brain constantly is constraining us to pan out, right? To move out and get the big picture of what is, what exists, versus the left brain constantly wants to go in and zoom in on a particular detail and give us a truncated view of that reality,
mm,
right? And it's constantly squeezing us in a direction that gets us to fixate and to saliency landscape in a way that will give us a stunted view of what actually is, right? And I think the advantage of going at a community, looking at what does that broken community, as broken as what it is, bring to
mm.
the table, because it does.
Yeah, and
People bring themselves to the
yeah,
table, number one.
and I think that process is not honored or really, I suppose, practiced and modeled enough for it to become a necessary approach. Because it's at some point we need to concede that this is a rarity. That the bad, the negative, the deficiencies in the communities, that all these overshadow the um, approach to highlight and bring out what is strong, what we should be focusing on. I'm having a word with Terence Martin here. You can't see him on the screen because he's very scared that his beauty will matched against mine. Um, yeah, you know what I'm trying to say. But um, so we are talking through a very, very important aspect in relation to community development or upliftment work, and specifically in the vocational training in agriculture space. This training model is unique in the sense that it is a learning and earning approach, but it also has this very, very specific emphasis, as Terry just described now, that we look at the folks that we are surrounding ourselves with, the folks that we have the honor to work with in the trenches, so to speak, that these are folks that are actually co-investors. And so this is to be appreciated. And I thank you so much, Terry, for highlighting that. Um, if I wanted to sort of bring up the rest of this slide here, or slide presentation here, and I want to go to this next question. And you would have noticed I mentioned this earlier. We should go on for another maximum 10 minutes here, and then we'll finish up here. Thanks for those of you who are sticking around with us. I think Owen has rejoined us. The question here, Terry, is how would you ensure that any project would be profitable? And what is meant with profitability? Is it just scaling up, or is there also this issue of passion maybe for nutritional food or a special kind of cuisine? Are these relevant questions in the context of realigning or adjusting one's attitude toward vocational training in agriculture? Terry, are you there? May have missed Terry at the moment. We've lost Terry. Yeah, I think we've. Oh, you are there, Terry, but I can't hear you for some strange reason. The question here about. Yeah, you're talking too. Are you talking to me? I don't know why I can't hear my brother. Well, while Terry is sorting out his sound there, I would like to play a song by André de Lang that I think so wonderfully captures this whole notion of that little thought, the kind of thing you can walk up to somebody, and just say, "You are such a treasure."
You know, somebody told me love is all in the mind. So don't ever waste your precious life and time. You're a special lady, so maybe you and the one. Thank God above. Should this be love, sweet love, such a treasure? I found what I'm looking for. Can't imagine being without you, baby. Such a treasure. I found what I'm looking for. Can't imagine being without. I've been so undecided and divided. I couldn't make up my mind. Cause I'm a victim of sweet love turned bad. But how come I'm excited, delighted? Oh boy, I'm in love. Never knew to love could be quite like this. Oh no.
Yeah, Terry, I don't know what you make of those words from André de Lang. Such a treasure. Yellow.
Yep, can you hear me?
But I got to bring you up here first. Sorry. I got you.
I'm here.
Sorry.
I'm
I hear you now. Sorry. Now.
Okay, good.
On my
Okay.
end. So my question there was quickly about André de Lang's song. There, "You Such a Treasure." That hits home for you.
Oh, it does. It does. And I think it has to do with the way in which we view people, the vantage point from which we view them. Because if reality has to do with relations, relations in every sense of that word, how things are related to each other, how people relate to things, how things relate to people, then we have a lot more to think about,
Yeah.
right? And I think profitability comes down a little further down the scale because when human beings relate, there is something amazing that happens.
Mm,
If what is real has to do with what I experience through my, let's say, five senses,
mm,
then relations are very important. And
yeah.
when I come to the agricultural space, and I come to people in the agricultural space,
Mm,
I do come up against this issue of profitability. What is profitability?
yeah.
Is it measurable? If it
Mm,
is, what does it look like?
mm,
Who profits?
mm,
Should they profit? Why do they profit? Right? And to what end?
mm,
Right? So I think there's something that precedes even the question of profitability, because when we work off of the assumption that reality is about relations, then people on people relating is very, very crucial.
mm,
And so when we talk about profitability, now we can talk about, you know, it's not purely just about upscaling.
yeah.
It's one human being
Mm,
touching the life of another human being,
yeah.
rich, poor,
Yeah.
bad, sad, glad.
Mm,
And that's why when we talk about the right side versus the wrong side and where do we focus, I still want to bring in that word. Let's look at the bright side
mm,
versus the wrong side.
mm. Oh,
Because
that's a good one.
the right side is really the bright side that we need to take off of and make our launching pad.
Yeah.
I
Thank.
remember walking through the streets there of Haarlem, Theo, not to
Yeah.
cut your word,
Go ahead, buddy.
and looking at some of the challenges and the
Mm,
darkness in some of the homes as I walked those streets
mm,
when I just got there the very first time. And what attracted me was the bright side. Now, the bright side was actually the dark side.
mm,
Very few get attracted to a dark side. But I remember sharing with you that when you looked into some of these homes, some of them didn't even have anything that you could call a door, right?
mm,
And when you looked inside the home, it was pitch dark,
mm.
right? Pitch dark. And yet that struck a note in my own soul about what could be done here in terms of bringing an added brightness to what most would view as a dark situation.
Mm.
So that's been a road to walk
Yeah.
for sure.
I'm glad you're mentioning this, the issue of relationships as in itself, the pursuit of meaningful relationships as an in as um, a significant sun to be looking at, and I'm using the word sun as the sun that shines, the with your illustration of pointing toward. And so, a couple of things that I think one of the questions we were asking when we're asking people to support what we do, people say, "Okay, now how do you do this?" And these were just four elements that, in all of them, point toward us valuing relationships. Whether you are listening to people together, calculating, and looking at feasibility of projects. That's what we do with folks when we plan our vocational training in agriculture, and we take 2 hectares of land and we say we're going to do plant potatoes on it or whatever is decided. We think and we plan and we calculate together. And then, of course, that last one, always looking for those folks in the community that show enormous skill in a certain area that can strengthen the quality of what we do. And so, yeah, on your screen, you'll see there an opportunity for you to make a difference. If we're going to leave that on the screen there, Terry, I don't know if you wanted to add something, particularly in relation to what I would consider a valid question, because we spend such a lot of time in on understanding the pursuit of wisdom as central to vocational training in agriculture um, that's meaningful. What's the opposite of that?
Well, the direct opposite that would be the pursuit of folly.
Mm.
The Hebrew wisdom scriptures, in a passage in Psalm 14, talks about folly.
Mm.
Says, the fool has said in his heart, no God. N-O, no God. Okay. In other words, the whole realm of the transcendent is kicked out as an underpinning to understanding reality,
Mm.
right? And together with that goes a whole series of devastating steps that follow. People always say, how do you know God exists? Well, I just watched the life of one who believes he doesn't. Very interesting what comes out of an individual's life like that.
Mm.
Very interesting. And so the question that kind of hits me between the eyes is, why rural upliftment?
Mm.
Because I think it has to do with making a wise choice. The downtrodden,
Mm.
the fatherless, the voiceless. We ourselves, Theo, you and I, come out of a culture where for many years we had no voice in this country. Our parents had no voice, our grandparents had no voice, and our great grandparents had no voice, and so it goes on. And we are the first generation to have experienced what it means to have a voice. And I think rural upliftment has to do with making every effort to provide an opportunity,
Mm.
a skillful opportunity that will give longevity. And so, why the pursuit of wisdom? Because the opposite is deeper devastation,
Mm.
absolute devastation, the way of folly.
Mm. Is it possible to see? Well, let me ask the question this way: what tangibilities in the South African context at the moment point toward that folly? Stated differently, how do you know that something or someone is peddling in that which is folly and not wise or pursuit of wisdom?
Well, when whole communities that have been devastated by
Mm.
economic decisions,
Mm.
by things like COVID,
Mm.
rural communities have taken great hits and still have not recovered from that.
Mm.
And then you see the economic devastation where funding is eaten by those who have, right? And so these communities are further deprived. Then you know that something major has shifted. The moral base has shifted
Mm.
because we do not calculate and take note of relations. And in this case, human relations and
Mm.
all that has impact on it. Then you know that the compass has shifted. There's no
Mm.
true north here.
Mm.
We have a metallic object close to our compass that's constantly shifting true north to a different position.
Mm.
And that's why we see further and further devastation. And so
Mm.
as we engage with these communities, we need to understand that there are very deep hurts here. And
Mm.
we need skill to, first of all, walk with them, to listen to them, to calculate, as you said, with them,
Yeah.
and project together with them.
Yeah.
At the same time, to be sniping for those who would lead people
Mm.
in those communities, from those communities.
Absolutely. Yeah. You mentioned the issue of economics, and I think it would probably be fair to say that the obsession with economics um, is probably an indicator that we've abandoned wisdom. I mean, it's important to pay the bills, that's for sure. It's important to make money, let's say. But if you make this on the backs of people, it is a blunder, and it maybe is an indicator. Terry, would you say that that's rather accurate?
I think that would be it gives the game away as to
Yeah.
how we view people. People are
Yeah.
things that
Mm.
need to be used, so we prize
Mm.
things over people
Yeah.
rather than people. And yet, when
Mm.
you make people the priority, it's amazing how things start to pan out just
Mm.
in amazing ways that you had not anticipated.
Mm.
If we watch where we are at in the agriculture project, and we look forward to the day where things will just become a little uh, less challenging than what it is at the moment, because people understand what we are about. I think there's still a lot
Mm.
of misunderstanding and suspicion,
Mm.
that we are there to just make money at the expense of relationships,
Yeah.
at the
I
expense of this relation.
yeah. I can't help but to think of this song. I'm sure you remember this one, and so we'll
I
play out
do.
this
Thank
particular
you.
song by good old BJ Thomas. Thank you so very much for joining us this evening.
You're welcome. You're
This
welcome. It's been
particular,
a privilege.
thank you for your time. I really appreciate that.
Thanks to you.
We'll
Sure.
listen to this particular song by BJ Thomas from an album called "You Gave Me Love." Um, Thank you for your time. We're playing out with BJ Thomas. Good night, everybody.
And using people only leads to misery. Using things and loving people. It's got to be being loved is in the giving. All we have is what we share. Love and life is for the living. You have to have a heart to care. And loving things and using people only leads to misery. Using things and loving people, that's the way it's got to be. So put your hand inside my hand. I don't know where the road will lead. We may not find the things we want, but we will find the things we need. And all we need is love. Using things and loving people brings you happiness, I've found. Using things and loving people, not the other way around. 'Cause loving things and using people only leads to misery. Using things and loving people, that's the way it's got to be. For you and me, for you and me.